A lot of times I do wonder and imagine, and I need you to join me on this. Just for a second, imagine a world where every decision we make is informed, every belief questioned, and personal growth just becomes intuitive. Welcome to Fresh Perspectives, hosted by myself, Banjo, where we delve into the unseen biases that shape our societal norms. Join me on this journey as we expand our thinking and open more pathways to understanding in business, finance, career, relationships, and so much more. All it takes, trust me, is a fresh perspective. Let's go. Hello, guys. Welcome to today's episode. It's been a minute, and I'm sure you guys have missed me. And the only reason why I say that is just because of how much I've missed you too. So the feeling is mutual. Today, I'm just going to go straight into the topic. And this topic, confirmation bias, is something that came on whilst I was on break. So even though I was on break, I really wasn't on break. My head is still thinking like, okay. But it was something that actually crossed my mind while I was on vacation. So over the years, I've always been someone who believed strongly in the fact that the grass is greener where you water the ground, not necessarily on the other side, as most people think, because I think what that does to you is that it keeps you in a loop that you're constantly chasing after something, thinking that it's always going to be greener on the other side, whereas it might not necessarily be the case. But anyways, so I think I've always had friends that are particularly like, these guys are suckers for the US. And it's very funny when I say, you just have that indifference that I don't know if it's as good. I don't think anywhere is an El Dorado as such. I don't think so, but yeah, I guess people can argue. And I think one of the things I usually just mention, at least for the pros of the UK, would be like the comprehensive healthcare that we all know, and even that doesn't cover everything, but yeah, it's still something. It's still something. And also like the lower cost of living. I think the UK is cheaper to live in. Like shopping in the stores and just seeing common things, like things that you would see for like 1 point something pounds, and you see $5. And we all do that thing, like you're all constantly calculating, like when you see something, you quickly check, okay, how much would this be? How much would this be in pounds and stuff? But I think, yeah, also the work-life balance is just something. It's just something. But obviously, one thing you cannot take from the US is the space. I think one of the things that really surprised me, I couldn't wrap my head around this even till I left. Like, how could a country be this big? Like, how could this country be this big? And I'm shocked to hear that Trump even wants to add Canada too. I'm like, what do you want, really? But I understand, like, I mean, maybe the more land you have, the more resources, natural resources, the more human resources and all those kind of things. I think those are the things you kind of consider in being or remaining as a world power and all. But I think that was something that was really shocking to me. And also, obviously, the average salary, is usually higher in the US. But for me, I've just always been like, guy, it's not that. I feel like it's overrated sometimes, but I guess that's not the purpose of this conversation. But when I got to the US, my first few days, I caught myself doing some things. And it was just the fact that so all along, all this while, those kind of conversations I've had in the past have done something to me that even I wasn't really conscious of. There were some biases that I had that I wasn't conscious of. And I think this is something that can happen to anyone and everyone, really. So my first few days, subconsciously, I would call out every difference. Like, oh, the plug. Guy, I saw all the chargers I took there, I couldn't really use. I couldn't use any. And I planned to even work there. So my laptop, I had to get a converter to change to be able to use the two plug. I don't know how to describe their plug, but it's just different. And I'm like, why would you make life this difficult? Like, let's just all be one. Can we all be one? And then the space. I never believed that I could question why we need this much space. Like, why do you really need this much space? But that was something that blew my mind as well. But I think what happened was that every little difference, I kept calling it out, not as though these were differences. I think to someone who was listening to me, if you were listening to me, it would sound as though I was complaining or I was trying to pick faults or pick the negatives out of every possible scenario. And trust me, I did a good job at that. Until, my attention was called to that. And I'm like, wait a minute. That's really not me. Because if you know me, I'm someone who really hates complaining. I do not like to complain. I believe that in life, there are things that you can change. There are things you can't change. And you need to know the difference as much as possible. I think that will make your life easier. I think that will make you reduce the headache that you give yourself, really. Because if you know there are some things that you just can't change, I think what you should do is to look for ways around it. How can you go about that? Solve that problem. But I do understand that sometimes you can't just help yourself. It's just part of the ways we respond to those kind of situations. And the analogy I always give is that when you touch something hot, it is a natural response that you probably remove your hand. It's reflex, right? Or you scream or something. That is how you respond. And sometimes when things happen, we just naturally respond by complaining sometimes and all those things. But particularly myself, I do not like to complain. And so when I heard that, it came as though I was complaining and all. And I'm like, wait a minute. It's not like this thing I'm actually really... They were not issues. They were not real, genuine issues. Although, yeah, slight inconveniences here and there. I can't plug. I can't charge anywhere. All the plugs, all the chargers that I took were basically almost useless. And then you have to I couldn't buy a converter for each and every charger that I took. Watch, laptop, phones, and all those things. So yeah, there were slight discomforts here and there, but I didn't think they were really things that were huge problems as such. But there were things that I called out. A lot of things, to be fair. Now I can't even remember every other thing, but yeah, those were the things that I just saw. I think it was my friend that called my attention to it. A lovely person, by the way. And immediately my attention was called to this. I was like, wait a minute, that can't be right. That can't be me. It's not really like I'm complaining, but obviously I'm already seeing the negatives. I'm seeing just the bad things, like what they're not doing right. Where even though they were doing a lot of things right, I wasn't seeing those things, trust me. And so it just reminded me that, this thing is actually confirmation bias. And what's confirmation bias basically? Or some people like to call it confirmatory bias, whichever way, it's still the same thing. And it's really just the tendency to search for information or interpret information or kind of favor and recall. So even the things you remember about certain things, is biased, is flawed. So that tendency to kind of search for or interpret things, favor or recall information in a way that kind of confirms or supports your prior belief about something. So over the years, I've tried to not overrate this place, the US, and in a way what that has done is to kind of help me build some beliefs or convictions. And so every slight thing, even transportation, well, that's a big thing. Even the way people talk, things like that, things that simple and common, I was interpreting it differently. I was searching for those things that would just kind of confirm yes, I said it. You see, I said it. And so in a way, it just it gave me an idea that I already had some preconceived notion about certain things. And either I accept it or not, it wasn't going to change anything. I only needed something to just further confirm it. And I say further in quotes because it doesn't necessarily have to be right. And that's where it gets interesting. Like, it does not actually necessarily be to confirm it, but the way I would interpret it is to confirm it. I shall force it one way or the other to, bring this into what I already believed or what I already expect. And I look around and I was like, this thing is actually very interesting because it affects us even in ways that we do not know, in ways that we probably do not even realize, even in business. And there was this interesting story about Netflix and Blockbuster. In 1985, Blockbuster was like a fast-growing business. Like, they quickly became the largest video rental chain in the world. And at that point in time, in 1985, they had like about 9,000 stores globally. And so what their business model is just like Uncle Taiwo, the video rentals. Where, you go into the rentals. I don't know if everybody listening would have this experience, but the days when we used to rent cassettes and all those things. So their business model was somewhat similar and it was straightforward. Like, you go into the God's Glory film rentals and then you rent the movies that you're interested in. And once you have rented, you've chosen your movie, you pay for it, and then you return it after a few days. If you like, return it early. If you like, don't return it early. God's Glory rentals are going to be happy if you don't even return it early because it just means that you get to pay late fees and all those things. So, however, after some time, digital technology, internet, and all those things, started coming up and people, were more about like looking to see how they could revolutionize that industry. And so that was where Netflix came up in 1997. So the two co-founders of Netflix, Mark Randolph and Reed Hastings. I'm sure a lot of people don't know Netflix is that old, 28 years old right now. So if you're 28 years old, Netflix have actually been around for as long as you have been around. That's basically what it means. But anyways, so these two co-founders in 1997, they started this business and it was somewhat similar to what Blockbuster was doing, except that this time around, you don't need to go into the stores physically. You could just go browse through the online catalog of movies that you wanted and then you pay for it. So you pay a monthly subscription fee. So you go online, browse through their movies and then select the movie that you are interested in and it gets sent to you to your address. And so this continued until like 2007, which was like 10 years after they had started the operation. And so now this time in 2007, they introduced this streaming service, which we have now. About before that, 7 years ago, which was like 2000. So in the year 2000, the co-founders reached out to Blockbuster and said, we are willing to sell this business to you. We believe this is what the future is. And it might be a good idea to just jump now and buy it for $50 million. But the executive at Blockbusters at that point in time, they laughed at them saying, oh, it's not possible. And so they were looking for all sorts of things to just kind of confirm their own bias that this is what we have always been doing. This is what we have always known. And so they just didn't really see any potential in Netflix or see the shift towards the digital media consumption or streaming service in general. By the time they would realize that the ship has sailed and then they launched their own online rental service, Netflix had already like established a strong customer base in that market. And so that reliance on late fee continued to like just send customers away. While Netflix, you don't have any renewal of late payment and those kind of things. It was covered by that monthly subscription. So as long as you're subscribed, you can watch movies as long as you want, return it whenever. The only thing I think of is how were they able to manage people from stealing the... If I cancel my subscription, maybe they I wonder what their strategy would be to kind of like curb people stealing or not returning movies and all those things. But eventually, Blockbuster ceased to exist. So there was a financial crisis in, I can't remember the year now, I think 2008 or so, that happened. And due to the fact that they were already struggling, they couldn't survive that financial crisis. And even though they had seen the signs, even though they heard those things, even though it was clear that this is where people are going, but because they were just like, no, like this thing. So that bias, in a way, kind of like led to the downfall of the business. In that same year, 2008, of the financial crisis, something interesting also happened. There were many investors, all these investment bankers, financial analysts, and all those things. They saw signs that there was going to be the housing bubble that was going to like blow, and they were going to lose it. They were going to lose a lot of money and all. They saw so many signs, so many red signals or red flags and warning signs that the market could crash. But what they did instead of like keeping themselves far away from the market at those points, they just believed that market will keep rising. Like it's been rising, it will just keep rising. And so even though, and this is something I've seen in my own personal experience, I've seen in people revenge trading, doing all sort of bad trading habits. Even me personally, like I've seen that play out in a number of ways. Like, you can see the obvious signs that this is, gonna crash. But because you want it to pump, you want to buy Lambo, you will do all sorts of analysis. And that's a tricky thing about those kind of things, which I'm going to talk about on another episode someday. You will always find what you're looking for. The same analysis that someone does to get a buy signal is the same chart, right, that the other person will use to find a sell signal. And so even though it was obvious to them, they were interpreting the market or the charts in a way that kind of like confirmed their biases, that the market will continually go up, it'll go up, it'll go up, it'll go up. But eventually, the market crashed and they lost fortunes. Like a lot of companies actually died because of that. Like they went bust because of that particular occurrence. And so this is something that I believe affects every one of us. You just might not have noticed it. And usually the effect is strongest when you have a desired outcome or you're going on Google, Dr. Google. I think one thing that, I always say is, if you have any symptom, please don't go to Google. But eventually, you could go to Google, but trust me, it's still good to see someone who is professionally trained. Dr. Google will give you what you're looking for. In fact, more than what you asked for. Those fears that you already had, like, could this be this? Trust me, even when you've not even searched for those things as keywords, they will bring it to you. And the way you would even interpret certain things sometimes will be based on what you kind of like expect. And so I think what is good to do in this kind of situation, especially when you're kind of like doing a research or trying to just browse through things, try as much as possible to evaluate that. Do I have like some unconscious confirmation bias that could play out here? Or are there some underlying biases that I just need things that I can't really look through objectively, but I might fall into that bias? And so philosophers have kind of categorized this effect into 4. And each of these effects or groups are things that I've seen play out so many times. And I myself have also been involved in some of this. The first one is attitude polarization. And this is just basically when a disagreement becomes more extreme, even though the different parties involved in the argument have the same evidence. Like, how can we both be looking at this same thing and we are still arguing? Oh my word. I remember some arguments I've had in the past. But the truth of the matter is, I particularly, I always open my mind. I always see. So when I see an evidence and I know that, okay, this doesn't support my argument, I know it can be very difficult to agree and accept the other person's views. But I try my best. But some people don't make it easier to, I understand. But I try my best to be like, okay. Let's take some steps back. But So attitude polarization is basically when we have the same evidence, we are looking at the same thing. How can you be saying this is blue and I'm saying this is green? Are we not both looking at the same thing? Sometimes it's not a matter of color blindness. We all can read, we all know, we all have. But I think sometimes it's just tied to ego. We just don't want to, accept defeat and all those things. So attitude polarization is one category. Another category is belief perseverance. And belief perseverance is basically when beliefs persist after the evidence for that is shown to be false. Like they've shown you that this thing is actually false, right? But your belief still perseveres. I think when you find yourself in that kind of situation, try as much as possible to review your lenses. Try as much as possible to step back and reassess, reevaluate things and see that if I wasn't me and if I didn't have this relationship with this, and this is just in relationship terms, now it could be in any other sense of life, but try as much as possible to take some step back. Like, okay, if I wasn't me in this situation, what would me do? What would be the advice for me? So another one is the irrational primacy effect. And basically this one is just when you favor an information that you come across or encounter early on in a series. Let's say you're looking for something or you're trying to research on something. A lot of times you would favor the first information that you see. So if the first information already tells you that this thing is bad, it takes much more effort to actually put down that information that you've encountered first in that order of series. Let's say there are two people. I'll use random names, Jane and John. Jane is stubborn, envious, interesting, intelligent, hardworking. But John is hardworking, intelligent, studious, envious, and stubborn. Now, these two people, so this is also related to first impression, like first impression lasts longer, blah, 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 and all those kind of things. But I think it has been proven that if those two people, Jane and John, should come to you, people tend to form a more favorable association with John, because the first thing they got to know about John is that John is intelligent, is studious, is hardworking, even though he has the same traits with Jane. It has been proven that people would naturally favor John just because, they have more good impression, things that, these traits that they first knew about them. And so it just kind of like highlights how initial information can irrationally just shape our judgments, leading us to overlook or undervalue subsequent details, even though they are equally important or valid, right? And the last one is illusory correlation. And this is when people falsely perceive an association between two events or situations. And this is more in terms of racism. This is why people would just falsely perceive an association between two events. So if this person is of this color and I saw a particular color do certain things, you just kind of expect that they are all the same. And racism is not limited to any race. Racism is not limited to any race. That's just something I need to also like, because sometimes I know people think it's limited, but it's really not limited. And you could be racist, you could be tribalistic. Sometimes you don't even know. That's the funny thing. Sometimes these things are unconscious. These things do not necessarily mean that they are true, and they do not necessarily mean that they are things that we should live our lives by. And to wrap up this episode, remember that your confirmation bias can be in how you search for information and how you interpret those information, or even what you remember, how you record that information. The same event can be recalled by two different individuals differently. So be sure to know why and how you're interpreting it, and just try to be as objective as possible. Bias will almost always be in our everyday life. There's nothing we can do about it. But it's far more profitable to be aware of why we do certain things, so we don't end up losing sight of things or people that really matter to us. All right. And the call to action, how I will close this, is that I want you to look into your life, like just reassess your past in recent times, especially your arguments. Do you think you've seen some of these confirmation biases play out in your relationship with others? Or going forward, if not, going forward, be more conscious that, okay, so it's possible, it's likely that I fall into these categories, but then how am I able to navigate my way out of this? And that's the whole purpose of this. Let me know what you think. If you've been in a situation where you've experienced these things, I know a lot of my friends that, especially the attitude polarization, like even though we are seeing the same evidence like this, they still would have their own opinion. And to change those things will take, I don't know, maybe God's intervention. But let me know what you think. Let me know in the comments. I'll speak to you all soon. All right. Have a great one.